What is good, y'all? It's your boy Deluxe, and on this video, we're gonna be talking about social media, and really how I take a different approach, not only with social media for myself, but as well as with what I teach my students in elevated mentorship in my one-on-one program, and really why they see results and long-lasting results. Whereas with some other barbers in the industry, you either see them build up and grow over time, and then either, if you remember from last video, how we had the S curve, how they kind of grow up, they have this growth period, and then they kind of fizzle out at top. So this is really how it's honestly a little bit perfect segue from last video, from talking about, I don't know why I'm drawing midair, but how we talk about the S curve, how we start out, we see that growth uptick, and then it kind of levels off at, and how we talked about also, that the best time to start a new S curve to ensure growth is right at when you reach the top peak of the previous S curve, to ensure that when that adaptation goes into or maxes out, you can go ahead and start a new growth period and almost seamlessly have continuous growth over time. So how do you see growth in that? Because this also applies to social media. We see, like I said before, we see a lot of not only just barbers, but individuals in general who start out small, and then they kind of have this really big exceeding upgrowth in their media and everything like that, and then they kind of fizzle out. And it's this fizzling out that happens that, from what I see at least, it's a misunderstanding of how to approach social media. So for me, when I start working with a new student, and we start working together, typically they want to go ahead and ask all types of different questions of tactics in terms of what times to post, what angles, and all of this type of stuff. But for what I've observed, at least, and have been doing for the past year and a half, working with different barbers on their social media, is that typically when we focus on the tactics, we don't see growth that they would like to expect. Typically over time, we see the growth in understanding of core principles. Now, this is because the platform of social media, and really anything in life, is forever changing. And change is inevitable in really anything that we do, whether it be in our industry, whether it be on social media, whether it be with our tools. You can see this in really every walks of life, and we'll go ahead and get a little bit deeper on that topic as well in this video, and how that actually correlates to content, to give you a better understanding. So what I like to think of this, and actually call this this principle, and what I teach, at least for this, because, you know, for me, I have a set of core principles that I try to follow at all times. If it doesn't fit within those principles, then it just does not happen. And for me, when I was creating this video, I wanted to go ahead and give the most value that would be also respecting my students and clients who invest and work with me one-on-one, to not give out as much information. So for this, this is really and we're going to go to the whiteboard, of course, and I got a new whiteboard, by the way, because that other one was really big and really hefty. But this principle really is simple, but it has many different layers to which you can apply it to when approaching content. It's simply this: adapt or die. And as you can see on the whiteboard, it's literally just that. And when you get this core principle of adapting or dying, and how it fits into not only your content, but also especially what we're going through right now with the barber industry, you'll get an insight of why barbers that we work with in elevated mentorship have an upper hand on the rest of the industry. Because evidently, a lot of barbers choose to, and it is a choice of whether you want to adapt or want to follow under the die category. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well too. So what is adapt or die? Well, the principle basically, for me at least, follows and derives from Darwin's theory of evolution, right? And if you're not familiar with Darwin's theory, I'm going to go ahead and read a example or a definition of that. And basically, it's a fact that over time, beings or things will change naturally over time due to their favorable physical or behavioral traits best suited for their environment. So what does that mean for the barber industry and your content? Well, for that, we're actually going to go ahead and go to nature, and I'll draw out a little diagram. And for this, pretend that these dots we will call them ants, right? So we have black and green ants. Don't ask why we have green ants. I don't know why, but that is what it is. So in an environment, these dots represent black and green ants. Now, in order to survive, black and green ants simply just have to live. They have to get food. They have to ensure their survival, and they have to mate, of course, to then produce offspring that then go ahead and push their little ant colonies forward for the future. But like anything else, they must eat, as well as everything else in the universe must eat, and they have something that eats ants. Now, we'll just say that this is a hawk or a bird, for sake of the example. So imagine that these ants are on the ground in the, let's say, rainforest, and the rainforest on the terrain has a darker environment, or has a like dark soil. It's always moist. It's nice and dark and rich. So these black ants fit and suit its environment best to coat and protect itself from being seen by any prey. So it can go ahead out and go and get food and bring back to their ants colony to go ahead and ensure survival. Whereas green ants stand out more often on the blacker background or the darker terrain. So when their prey comes around, they can go ahead and spot them out and pick them off easily. So over time, you will see an absence and dwindling down of certain species like green ants, because they simply get eaten. They're not best suited for their environment. In this situation, the black ants were best suited for their environment. Now, this doesn't mean that these black ants survive and will go on forever and ever and ever. This just means that they survived that adaptation in their environment. Their prey came in, swooped up, and over time made the green ants the weaker link. And these obviously had the stronger trait and were able to survive. And that way you see more black ants around. Now, there might be other things that come up with this too, and other changes, but that is just like a very simple shot in time of an example of this happening. Now, what this also means is that every time that a variation like that happens, we come to a Y, or a split. So we could see this would be the the art, or the example that I give you. So we have black ants, black and green ants right here. Let's put for example, and then we have a split where all of a sudden the prey comes in, their environment changes, and the black ants go ahead and survive, while these green ants over here, well, they die off. They don't continue on anymore. Okay, and so this continues on, and let's say another variation in their environment happens and occurs. So another block, bam. Let's say there all of a sudden there is a flood, right? And there is a species or a character trait where somehow some ants adapted to be able to breathe underwater, some ants didn't. Just humor me for a second. That means, let's say these ones could not breathe underwater. That means they are done with. That character trait is extinct, and these ones continue on and keep on passing down. Not only have they passed down the black ant character trait, but they have also passed down to be able to breathe underwater, right? And this continues on and on and on. You'll see all these breaks break in. Okay, there is a new environment incoming. Which character traits will die, which character traits will adapt and continue to live on. And that's just evidently how the world works and natural selection works, is that we are always in a forever evolving environment, and we must adapt to our environment, especially to ensure our survival. And that can also mean us as people, we can become more aware of what's happening. We don't have to go ahead and be accustomed to natural selection if we are aware, and we can also learn and adapt to changes that we see. So where else do we see this? Well, we see this also in business, right? So we see this in like companies like Walmart versus other department stores, where Walmart all of a sudden beat out every single department store for lowest prices, no matter what. And that's when you saw Walmart really, really skyrocket to be one of the bigger companies in the world. Also with that, you see then Amazon comes in, internet booms, and Amazon comes in, takes advantage of that, and then was able to take over Walmart's terrain and really take up the customer and the market space, because they were able to adapt to an online environment, whereas the brick and mortar or the physical store place really was, you see, dying off, especially in today's world, right? We even saw this with, let's say Apple's like the iPhone or the iPod versus the MP3 player. And they saw adaptations and were able to move forward in an ever-changing environment. And actually, they did change the environment themselves, right? So not only does this occur in natural selection, but also, they evolve for products, services, and in our case, our social media content. So to make this more clear, like I said, so you kind of got a very small snapshot of what happens when things evolve and splits happen. And we see this in all of life. And I'll make a quick drawing right now, right? I'll make a quick drawing. And in this drawing, you'll see a lot of similarities to some stuff that you might have seen in nature. And it's not going to be the best drawing, but in what you see here, this resembles what the overall picture of what our industry looks like, as well as content, right? Some things go ahead and we all start, let's say this is when Instagram first got implemented or content first started coming out. And we see different trends of splitting off. So this is like different areas of, obviously, some mutations or splications happen, and we go ahead and move off into different industries. We move off into different content, ways we approach content. And this is forever changing. And this is just like a quick sample drawing. But what this looks like is a tree, right? And we can see this in all of life, whether it be a tree. This could also represent how our structure in our bodies are, with starting with our heart and going out from blood vessels. And it's evident in all walks of life if you just kind of take a stop and slow down and look. And when I say and speak of, like, when you focus on one thing, the world literally becomes your classroom. Well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So how do you ensure that you don't get cut off right here and continue to forever go up? Well, you must actually, instead of what we saw earlier, where it was probably a snapshot of what happens right there, of the something happens, occurs, one goes here, another dies off, another comes here, another dies off. That's like a small snapshot of what happens literally right there. But instead, we must look at the entire picture for where really this occurs, and where we might come up to a point like this and we see, oh wait, this might end off right here. Whereas if we take this branch right here, we can see if we follow the path correctly, we'll end up here or even up there. And what we have to do is take a big step back and really see the industry as a whole. And I talked about this before. Us as barbers have to really go ahead and get out of the worker mentality and labor barber mentality and take a deep breath and get out of the eye of the storm. Because when you're in the eye of the storm, nothing can seem to make sense at all, right? So another example of this is basically you need to ask, that didn't make sense. Another question of this is basically you need to ask, basically what everybody needs to ask themselves as a barber or creating of content is simply this: am I adapting or am I dying? And that can be evident in your content, that can be evident in your business. But the biggest factor, like I said before, is awareness. And you see this in military forms, you see this in sports, you see this in business. You always have somebody at the helm, at the very top of the top, who oversees everybody else and the business as a whole, and can oversee and make decisions on what direction the ship should be moving. Whereas if you're on the forefronts, let's say if you are, sports, for example, you have a coach that is up in the booth who is looking down, who can see the whole field layout, who can see the other team's movements, calling down to plays on the field. Now, you can go ahead and say, oh, some players make audibles and adjustments. Yes, but they have an awareness to go ahead and see the field as a whole. Whereas some players that don't make those calls are ones that don't have the field awareness, right? They can't see the whole field. They can't take themselves out of what's happening in front of their face and take a step back and take a third person look and really see, instead of what's happening in just this small moment right here. This is what most people are focused on, when instead you need to take a step back and really focus on what's happening here to ensure that you end up on this top branch and continue to create the correct paths. And like I said, this is not tactics of social media. This is a core principle to be able to follow in really all of in your business. And we can apply it to social media very simply. As you can tell with a lot of my students who see the growth over time as well. As I said, look, right now with the coronavirus, we are all up against a point in time where we can either adapt or die. A lot of barbers are figuring out that they are not able currently to make an income because they're not physically working. Or they can't make the money because even though they might be still quote unquote cutting hair, and we do know some people who still are, that's on them. I would always like to preach, please everybody, be safe and be mindful of what we are doing. But people need to be able to make money to be able to push their lives and adapt and be able to at least survive, right? Because we're always, as any living being, is pushing for survival. So with understanding this and adapt or die, for me, I've always taken the approach of cut less hair, make more money, in terms of raising prices, cutting back time to be able to allow you to focus on other businesses so that you can eventually over time adapt. And instead of staying in this place, if we take a small shot, instead of working in a barbershop and coming up to a point where you start raising prices to cut hair for less money and for not hair, less money, less time and make more money and continue to climb upwards. Or if you want to stay exactly where you're at and continue to do 30-minute haircuts for $30 a cut and try to fit in as many cuts as possible, because that's honestly madness. And when you understand this, adapt or die, and understand this model of where we are eventually going, especially in the industry, you can see where social media becomes an evident part. And not only just social media, but adapting to a platform where it is with new platforms like TikTok. The platform Instagram is now starting on the decline. Now, I'm not saying go over to TikTok, but now I'm saying basically is evident that Instagram is the top dog and has been for a while. And that is where most high-end clients are going to be at. And how can we adapt or die to that? And that question cannot be really made up in this video, but this video was meant to really present you with that idea, because that is the idea that all students I try to implement in whether it be the week 1 or 2 of our meetings and where they're working together to push and grow their barbering career to eventually start charging $100. And you could see that as South Bay Chris, as one of my students. And really, I simply asked them this question, not like straightforward, but in a sense, how are you going to adapt? Because if you're not adapting, you will die and you will cease to exist. Your business will be stagnant and you'll be caught in the wheel. And dying in the barber industry is simply getting caught in like I said before, doing 14-hour work days, cutting for 30 minutes out of the time, trying to make it work. When it comes to this time where we can't work for 14 hours, we can't be cutting that much hair, or even doing something of that sort, we die, right? And not physically, but our business dies off. We start panicking, and that's when a scarcity mindset starts to come in. So during this time especially, a lot of barbers, a lot of us, not me, I don't really cut hair too much anymore. I just work on helping barbers grow their careers now. But we have a ton of time in the barber industry right now to really take a look at what we can do. How can we adapt and how can we die? And my message to you simply is this. It's going to be very, very redundant, but it's going to reinforce this principle. Get out of the front lines. Stop being a soldier on the front lines and thinking of just work every day and whatever I'm told to do, and start looking at the bigger picture as a whole. Because this will allow you to make decisions, investments, as well as moves for your business that will ensure you to get up to here if you could see the whole playing field, rather than being in the trenches and being on the front lines of battle, or doing the dirty work in a big company where the CEO is simply looking at this and saying, cool, we just gotta go here, 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 and make these moves to adapt. And the best do that. Jeff Bezos is one of the best at doing this. And will somebody overtake Bezos eventually? Because everything adapts or dies. Something will adapt further than him. It's evident. It's not evident. That's the wrong word to use. It's eventually going to happen. But if you can focus on that principle, especially with your content, that will probably help you more than any type of, and I've seen it help barbers more than any type of tactic, than any type of strategy on social media. Even though our strategies are some of the top, in my opinion, we have a greater understanding than any individual, in my opinion, on how to attack social media that affects business, not just growth in social media, but social media that affects your business. And the results show for that. So, like I said before, simply ask yourself this question: am I adapting or am I dying? Is my business adapting or is my business dying? And where can I go ahead and take a step back? And where does this bigger picture really give to me to have the awareness of what move to make next, to ensure that I don't fall down the line that gets extinct and stops evolving? So with that, very simple video, very different approach to even thinking about content or even barber industry in general. If you found this of value, I would highly recommend you go ahead and like and subscribe this video. I drop a video like this every single week, as well as I will be dropping a tutorial, I believe next week. I think that's up in the queue for next week, as well as make sure to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. I drop a podcast similar to like this content that I said today, about twice every week. I might drop back to one every week for right now, just because I'm doing this content as well. You can go ahead and subscribe or hit the link and listen to today's episode of the podcast in the links below. As well as if you are interested in working with me one-on-one with an elevated mentorship to learn how to get results like a lot of my students, I will simply leave the link as well in the description to where you can go ahead and send in an application to see if you're a good fit for what we do in the industry. So with that, like I said before, if you found this video of value, go ahead, like and subscribe this video, share it with one person, as well as see you on next week. All right, y'all, stay safe, just stay safe this next week, because there's a lot of crazy things going on in the world, and we are responsible for a lot of other people, not just ourselves. So be aware of your actions and stay home. All right, y'all. I'll see you later.